Eric, Steve, and myself did what we did, and we took some crazy chances, and we sort of just created our own wave, rather than trying to catch whatever the current wave was that was going on. We sort of went full steam further into our own worlds.
Eric, Steve, Joe, it would be an understatement to say I'm thrilled to talk to you. It's a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
You're very welcome. Nice to be here.
Yes.
If it's all right, I'd like to go back to the year 1996 when G3 started and just set the scene. It was a year where Steve released his brilliant album Fire Garden. Eric, you released Venus Isle, and Joe, you were in between two records, the very special self-titled record, and the next year you released the mighty Crystal Planet. So I was wondering, when you think about this year and the year G3 came to be, what comes to mind?
Wow, that's a lot. That was a lot. You know, the the thing about the mid 90s uh for us guitar players, it was really kind of interesting because there was there was a big shift that had started right around 1990, and it was a really good, you know, sort of musical metaphysical kick in the head, to try to reevaluate the way everybody was playing and the way people were making records and putting on shows if they were just concentrated on the guitar. And for us, uh, mostly electric guitar. So I always look back and I think, wow, what a fantastic time. Even though when you're in the middle of it, it seemed like there was a lot of struggle going on because so much was shifting around. So it doesn't surprise me now in retrospect. I look back and I think, well, of course, Eric, Steve, and myself did what we did, and we took some crazy chances, and we sort of just created our own wave, rather than trying to catch whatever the current wave was that was going on. We sort of went full steam further into our own worlds, and then this the concept of G3 really resonated with the audience, and we found our audience out there so that we could continue doing what we really wanted to do, and not really be affected by what was happening in the pop music world, or this music world in general. Um, so yeah, it's funny. Uh, I do remember uh, a fantastic feeling of elation when we finished the first show, knowing that we saw it work. When the three of us were on stage and we were playing either our own stuff or the cover songs, we could see the concept resonating with the audience, and we knew that this was it was going to be a great tour, and it was going to really have legs. So what a fantastic moment that was.
Yeah, looking back at that, sometimes it's easier to look back at things years later to kind of see what was actually happening. And I think Joe nailed it. You have various kinds of uh, mentalities in an artist, and some are focused more on, you know, pop culture, radio, falling in line with various trends or genres that are popular at a time. And then there's people that they just have almost like an innocent pull to do something that's just different. And us three are, as Joe was saying, are kind of examples of that because the music, those records that we had out around that time were very on one level guitar centric yet artistic. They were melodic, song based guitar melody, and in some cases vocals, but they weren't necessarily trying to fit in with the the incredible shift that was happening in the scene at the time, because pop music was moving from 80s kind of culture to 90s. But our records were more centered in a whole different community of people. So when the call came in to do the tour, I knew instinctually that it was very different than the previous pop rock kinds of tours I was involved in. So it felt very comfortable. And at that time, I hadn't done a lot of solo touring. And when Joe mentioned it, I saw what he was going for. I saw how I could fit in and contribute. And obviously, with Eric, the image of the three of us right at that moment just felt so appropriate, so perfect. And now looking back, it's just so interesting to see how we really did just follow the beat of our own drummer, so to speak. And many artists do that, but we were lucky because we're part of a community that just will never not be there because the guitar is such a prominent instrument and so well celebrated. So I knew I was immediately interested.
Eric, can you
Yeah.
remember when you were approached for the first time about doing this?
Yeah, I remember Joe was, coming up with this idea of, meeting of multiple musicians, and it was an exciting concept. I guess it's been done, in swing music and jazz and stuff over the years. It was he was maybe a little ahead of his time in trying to do something on a pretty major basis, for guitar and rock music. And I think it was a novel, kind of forward-thinking thing. And yeah, it's like, Steve said, kind of maybe march into a different drummer, but it all kind of instigated because all three of us just love guitar. It's like we get a lot of joy I mean, we're thinking, oh, we want to do music, we want to do songs. And within that context, so we're just, man, I just love playing, and you take that to the streets and you realize that there's lots of people that just want to have fun, enjoy playing guitar. And those are the people, like Steve and Joe were saying, you'd be celebrating that. And these people, maybe they like this kind of music or that, but they have that commonality of they find that same joy in playing guitar. So they wanted to come out and celebrate with us. And it was pretty intense. There was a lot of people that came out and they just, they were enjoying that conjoining celebration. It was a pretty powerful idea at the time, and I'm glad we did it.
And Joe, when you had the idea, was it always like the idea that everybody brings his own band? Because that makes it really special compared to other maybe guitar festivals where people join each other or something. Everyone came with his own fantastic band and still does.
Yeah, I think that that's first session that we had at Bill Graham Management, trying to figure out how to make it both attractive to the audience and to each of the artists that we were going to invite. And really the key was that they could bring their own bands and they could have enough time on stage with their own bands to complete their musical message to the audience. And two things we had to consider there was if we had more than three people, it would reduce the set time of each player and it would become less attractive. The more guitar players we had, the less attractive and even financially feasible to pull an artist out of their usual touring schedule and say, come and play for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and share the week, so to speak, on tour with these other players. It would be difficult for them to make it work because people, they come in with their band and their crew and everything, and it's got to make sense at the end of the day. at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you know. So we literally started with the idea of 20 guitar players, then 15, then 10, and then seven, and then six. And then when we finally got to three, we thought, okay, everybody gets almost an hour, and we can get in and out of the venues, uh, and and not get fined for basically playing too long, you know. And that's also a key part of just behind the scenes for touring musicians. You got to load in at whatever 7:30 in the morning, and you got to get out. You got to get off stage, especially if it's a union theater or venue, and the crew has got to have time to pack up and drive away. So we have to work within this time frame. And three was the magic number because, as I said, we mechanically it worked uh, on the stage side of it, and for the venues, promoters, and it was attractive to call a friend up and say, "Hey, bring your band. You can play 55 minutes and then jam with us for 30, you know." And you could, I mean, I remember making those calls and I could tell everyone was thinking, "Wow, I could do the four songs from my new album, you know, the most popular songs from my catalog, and still feel like when I leave the stage that I did it. You know, I played a real gig for my fans, you know." And it worked, and it was the magic number. Three is not very often the magic number, but in this case, it was the magic number.
Steve and Joe, of course, we know already, or I know that you have a long history together, but Eric, were you already friends with Steve and Joe when G3 happened? Did you guys know each other well at that point?
Maybe not well. I mean, I'd done some touring with Joe before, and I met Steve way years before when he was maybe the last part of him being with Alcatraz, and you know, we spoke from time to time, but I had done a handful of tours with Joe as double bills, you know, opening for Joe. So I knew them both, and yeah, we never had the opportunity to put it together the way we did. So it was a nice opportunity to strengthen that, you know, musical alliance.
Were you aware? I mean, because obviously all three of you have changed the history and the guitar as an instrument forever, but were you aware at the time that how much of an impact G3 also would have, and how did you have an idea about that?
Oh, I had some grandiose thoughts at the time. I thought it would be just a fantastic continuation of what I was exposed to as a kid. And Eric kind of hinted at this before, where the idea of getting, three or four artists together to make a live album specifically was something that had been done quite often, especially in the jazz world. And when I was a little kid and my parents would have all their jazz LPs out, I would see that all the time. I'd see three horn players, live record. And I just remember how, it was just really cool to think that these musicians that wouldn't normally play together would get together and they'd play all these standards for this one particular event. And even as a young kid, rock and roll generation kid, I still could appreciate the differences in their musical styles, specifically the sax players, and how they just had different tones and different approaches to playing, and uh, and and I just thought, wow, this is amazing. This is, as a fan of music in general, it really turned me on. I just thought this is really great. You can, a Jerry Mulligan, is playing next to the president, and it's just, I it was a lasting impression, I guess, that it made on me. So as time went on, and you know, uh, Al Di Meola and John McLaughlin and Paco, they put out a fantastic record, very different format, acoustic, all three of them playing at once. But I just remember that thinking this is like a continuation of what I saw when I was a young kid, just turning into a musician, that this collaboration was a good thing. It's just really hard to figure out how to do it, how to get people together, because the business of putting on concerts, they have their own ideas and rules, promoters and venue operators, and you got to listen to them. I mean, we work together. We're really partners, and so that took a while to figure it out. But I'm so happy we did, and it did become a winning formula, uh, which is why we're all here today talking to you.
When did the idea for the reunion come about?
That started with my son Zizi, who came to me a little over 2 years ago with an idea about doing a documentary to chronicle his young life, starting out on tour with us, and his association with all the musicians who play guitar. And the backstory is that the week that G3 started in '96 was the week that he turned 4 years old. And Rabina and I decided he should always come with us, that we were not going to, I wasn't going to leave town for 2 months or something like that and leave the family at home. So that was a big change for us as a family, and it exposed ZZ to the fact that his dad was a real weird guy, and he had a very funny job, and all of his friends were weird, and they all did the same thing, and it became kind of normal for him to ride on a tour bus and sleep in hotels and, play with his toys while Eric and Steve were tuning up and talking about guitars and amps, and it was an interesting life that he wanted to sort of sort out. And at the same time, he was very interested in getting to the bottom of why guitar players like us and all of our friends around the world are so crazy about playing the guitar, our passion for music and expressing ourselves in front of audiences around the world. And so he eventually uh, went around the world and he interviewed everybody that you could think of, like Robert Fripp and Brian May and Steve and Eric and Tom Morello and just maybe 30, 40, 50 guitar players are interviewed in the film. Um, and at some point he said, wouldn't it be great if you guys got back together again and did a show? And then that conversation turned into, well, what if we did a tour? And even though it was short notice, we were able to pull it together. Everybody had a short window open between all our other responsibilities and gigs that we could get together and do this show. And it turned out that those 3 weeks on the West Coast worked perfectly. There were venues where ZZ and his film crew could come and shoot and document the tour, and eventually ZZ jumping on stage and playing Summer Song with me. But it really did start with him, just with that idea that he had of the documentary chronicling his life as a little kid on the road.
Steve and Eric, how did you find the idea to do the reunion?
Well, it was something I was always hoping for, and it was something that I kind of assumed would happen because the G3 brand is a great brand. It has a whole collective attached to it, which is, a particular type of player and listener, and it's huge and it's worldwide. Uh, I mean, it's one of the great things about being a rock guitarist is the guitar is so beloved in every corner of the world. I mean, on my last tour, I played in like Bahrain and India, and these places that sometimes you have no idea what to expect, but you go there, and all these great, young, enthusiastic guitar players come to the show. So that was, the environment of G3, and it continued and it grew and it expanded with Joe's, navigating it through decades. It's a fantastic brand. And it just would seem natural that at some point we're going to pull it together, the original lineup, and do a little celebration of this brilliant, giving brand that has been so beloved, really, through these decades, and will probably continue in some form. So I was waiting for the call, in a sense, and luckily it all came together. And as Joe said, one of the most difficult things about putting any kind of a tour on is finding everybody's sweet spot. I mean, I've had to kind of navigate that with Generation X, which was 5 guitar players, and it was it was the biggest challenge, and still is. But it was so nice when that little opening came. At first I'm like, 9 show. Was it 9 shows, Joe? I forgot.
Uh,
Something
no,
like
it's
we
got to be
only did
more.
like
13? Was it
yeah,
13?
maybe 13, but however
Yeah.
many shows it was, we're used to like, okay, you got 45 shows on this leg, and so I was excited, but I was like, you know, this let's do more. But it's the schedules, and everybody's commitments. Uh, so I'm glad that we did it. And what's really exciting to me is it's properly documented. I mean, the label is really bringing it home. I mean, this package, this G3 Live package, is so worthy of the 30 years that it kind of represents. Each one of us in the package have their own disc of the entire set on vinyl. And this is just remarkable for a label. Yep, there you go.
I
For
just
a
happen to
label.
have it right here. Right here.
Yeah, you just happen to have it. I mean, this is a gorgeous package,
That's you, by the way.
There we go. Pretty in pink. And if I wasn't a part of it and I was a guitar player in our collective, boy, what a great gift, to have this package that's done so well with the CDs and with this beautiful vinyl. It rare these days. That goes to show you the support that this community has for this kind of music. It's fantastic.
It's also very interesting set list wise. Eric, you focused more a bit on older material. The majority is from Venus Isle. There's 2 songs of Avaya Music Com, and there's 1 exclusive jam on it. How did you think about what you want to have on the record for your part?
I think I just, I did a set and I just tried to pick the tunes that I thought were better played that also went together with each other. So it was kind of like after, listening to the whole set, go, well, why don't we use these? It sounded like I pulled these off better than the other ones sometimes. What would be more musically interesting to people? I just tried to think, well, what was cohesive? What had continuity to it? From those given nights that it was recorded, and try to put it together in a way that would be try to make it as listenable as I could to the audience or the listeners that bought the record. It was more like what I felt emotionally hit the mark or musically hit the mark, and let it kind of just speak for itself, and instead of me jumping in and go, well, I got to use this tune, just kind of, well, this one seemed like, what I mean? Kind of just let it kind of say what's right,
And Steve, for you, it fell into a good time setlist wise because the Great and Violate was out, and you focused a lot on that record, and you had a lot of great songs from it. And then, of course, For the Love of God and Tender Surrender. How did you pick the songs?
Well, I was just fresh off of the Inviolate tour, and I got to tell you, I just love playing that music. I built that record so that I can go out and play the songs because a lot of the music in my catalog it's a real challenge to try to bring to the stage, and because it's sometimes it's heavily produced and whatnot. So the Inviolate material was just so great to play. I love playing Little Pretty and Teeth of the Hydra and Zeus in Chains and Avalancha. So I just thought, you know what? Nobody, nobody cares. I'm going to play all new music from the record. Oops, sorry.
All right.
And of course, you want to go back into the catalog and pull a couple of tracks that people are probably going to want to hear. So that's why I picked those For the Love of God and Tender Surrender. So yeah, I kind of like the way it turned out.
And Joe, you also had a great mix between new stuff and old stuff. You had some classics on it. You also had Sahara on it, a future classic, but not as old as the other classics. And you had 1980, and then stuff like, of course, Always With You, Always With Me. How did you choose, and how did you think about what you want to have on the set list,
We,
on the record?
our history right before this tour was similar to Steve's in that we had done a lot of touring doing a solo show. So we had been out on the Elephants of Mars tour quite a bit, and that was a really long set, 2 hours 45 minutes. We had an intermission. We covered everything. So when the idea came to, shrink it down to 55 minutes, we really just tried to think like, well, what haven't we done? What was fun to do? What's really more lively and pliable, that we can react more to on a night-to-night basis. There's always, and as Steve had mentioned, you want to do new things for yourself and for the band just to keep things super interesting. But that there's people in the audience that maybe have never seen you before, and this is the one time they're going to come out, and so you kind of feel that responsibility to play some of the most popular songs amongst your fans. So the only thing that was the wild card was what song was Easy going to play on. And so I said, well, you pick that one. He's a pretty good guitar player, but he's a filmmaker, so he doesn't sit around and noodle all day like us. So he had to think about that, and he was thinking about it, I think, from a director's point of view, like what's it going to look like if I'm playing a particular song, with my father, what songs allow me to move around on the stage or just concentrate on one kind of guitar part. So he was the one who brought up summer songs, so that was easy. That helped us out. I think there are some challenges, with each piece of music that you bring out to the stage because of the prior production. In other words, the fans know the songs from the album, and then somehow we have to make them work on stage. I always think my job was the easiest because it's pretty straight ahead rock and roll. Eric and Steve, it's a lot more complicated, a lot more uh, tonal switching. Steve's got the Hydra to play. I
Yeah.
where I'd get nervous every night just thinking like, I don't know how he's going to remember to do all that stuff. But it was
Me
great
too.
every night just to hear the two of them do their sets. It was what a privilege, to be able to be part of that, and just to be able to listen every night. It's fantastic.
The Hydra, Steve, we have to talk about it a little bit. How's it traveling with that beast?
Well, dragging it around is probably one of the biggest challenges because in America or Europe, whenever we have a bus and a truck, it's fine. But when you have to fly, like the first time I took it out of the country was South America and Mexico, and we only did about 12 shows, and the fee for ship because you can't, you have to freight the Hydra, you have to ship it, you can't put it on the plane because the case alone is it's a case within a case. Just for those shows, it cost $60,000,
Oh my God.
and it didn't make it to one of the shows. So I had the whole rest of the world to tour, and I really wanted to play it, but I couldn't figure out how to make it economically work. So my brilliant guitar tech, Doug MacArthur, figured out a way. He made two cases, and he takes the necks off the Hydra every night, and he puts the necks in one case and the body, and then he assembles it in the morning. It's crazy because you have to change all the strings, and he's got it down to he could take the Hydra apart in 6 minutes, and his new record for putting it together is 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy. And I did when I shot the video for the Hydra, I practiced standing up and playing it with a waist strap. And although I could do that, it wasn't uncomfortable. You could actually play it pretty well. Uh, it was precarious because it's so heavy. One wrong move and you just go over because it doesn't move like a guitar. If you try to do your rock and roll stuff, it's like, you're done. And I remember I was talking to Joe, and he said, very rarely Joe says, do this or don't do this. You know, yeah, very rare back, except when I was a kid taking lessons. But he said, I'll never forget, he said, do not wear the Hydra on stage, put it on a stand. And and I thought, okay, there it is. It, there it is. Because I was on the fence. And I got that, and luckily, because it would have been a an amusing disaster.
Yeah.
But I dodged a bullet. Thank you, Joe. And learned how to navigate it on the stand.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Com Excuse me. Compared to, I mean, because it's everybody plays a set, but compared to your solo shows, how is like the setup? Is there a difference when you play Eric, for instance, when you play, you bring more acoustic guitars probably to full evenings with, but how does your setup differ?
Well, musically, you mean, or the gear,
Yeah, the gear.
oh, it's the same, really. I just brought my regular rig.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is
Except
it the same? Sorry.
I didn't bring, like you say, some acoustic instruments or a keyboard or anything like that. I just brought my main guitar rig.
So it's basically the same
Hmm.
effort that goes into it, like tech wise.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And Steve and Joe, how's it for you? Is there a big difference or?
Well, I was still running the Marshall's mono for that tour, so it was exactly the same. One head, two cabinets. They stayed in the same spot too, because I was the third act, so that means my amps were further back stage. Um, but Steve had to make a change though, but he can explain that to you.
Um, I was coming off the Inviolate tour, and the songs each had required a different kind of a guitar. So if I was playing Little Pretty, I needed a semi-hollow, and I had the John Scofield psychedelic Ibanez that worked beautifully. So I had to bring one of those, and the Hydra, you can only bring one of those, and Zeus in Chains was a seven string. So I try to bring backups, you know, But the G3 tour from the Inviolate tour, I'm pretty sure it was the same rig. Uh, I use Synergy preamps and through power amps and the Fractal as effects. And my layout is actually kind of simple in a sense. Uh, the Hydra is the only quirky thing because it has four outputs that run along a Cat 6 cable and go into a brain that's then separated into mono outputs for each of the necks that go into the Fractal, which luckily has four mono ins and four stereo outs. So all the necks came out stereo and went to including the harp strings. But that was the same. So pretty much similar, but that's why I got to bring so many guitars.
But for the jams though, Steve would go mono. You wheel
Oh
out
yeah,
just
yeah, that
mono
was
together. Yeah.
yeah, the jams because we clear the stage for each act pretty much. So you want to get stuff on the stage while Joe's just announcing for you to come out. And I'm not going to drag out a big stare at my rig. So you pare it down, simplify. And for that, I had a mono rig with just I have it, it's called the Jam rig. And it's sort of similar to my rig, where I use the Synergy and a power amp and a small pedal board, uh, but it's mono. And it can be wheeled out while I'm walking out.
Talking about the jams, how do you pick the songs, or what does like a song has to have for you to have it as an G3 encore?
Oh, I like the idea that it's not one of our songs. It's a song that people have known for decades that they instantly recognize and can sing along with. It's great if they're vocal songs, obviously, and they have to be simple enough so that if we roll into town and Neil Sean wants to jump on stage, it's easy for him to just jump in and fit in. He doesn't have to learn any unusual parts or anything like that. I mean, we're not going to do like, Teeth of the Hydra as a jam song. Can you
Rats.
imagine how we would screw that up? It would be,
Well, I do have
maybe
three necks.
I do. Um, but yeah, so that's, and then I mean, it's really quite like it's like three kids just talking about the songs they'd love to play, and that's how it starts. We just start texting each other like, "What do you feel like playing?" And each of us starts to text back 15 or 20 songs that they've played since they were kids, and how about this one? How about this one? Can you do that? Can I sing this? That kind of thing. And then it just gets shorter and shorter, and then we wind up with about six or so that we're really going to focus on, and hopefully they all work live.
This time, for instance, it was Born to Be Wild, which
Yeah.
was a fun jam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It I was looking for just I always like the simplest stuff that can get broken down and still go right back to the song without, you know, any damage occurring. And so that usually means if you can get rid of any songs that have like long melody parts. Because if you're going to do Freebird, everybody has to like rehearse it and get it down. And you can't have someone just jump in unless you are super confident that they know how to do it. Uh, but Born to Be Wild, not only is it simple, but it's very pliable. I mean, you can go almost anywhere with it, and the song still holds together. Um, if you've got really great singers like Eric and Ray, then you want to take advantage of their vocal abilities and get them up to the mic, as much as possible. So that's got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, true. You got a lot of good singers in the band
Yeah.
also. Yeah. Um, how does a tour, or let me put it differently, when you tour together, how does it work? Are you hanging out on the road together? Is it just you meet for the concerts? How is the tour life for the three of you then?
Yeah, usually everybody's traveling on their independent buses. So that once you get on the bus, you're pretty much, you know, uh, independent. But there are occasions where we'll get together. We had a lovely dinner thrown for us in San Diego on the tour, and that was fantastic. But other than that, usually like I bring my family or my wife, and we're off doing stuff. But we do see each other for large parts of the day. We have our meet and greets, sound checks, gigs,
Mhm.
after show,
Mhm.
so we're pretty together.
How has touring changed for you when you compare the first G3 tour at the time of that tours to now? What would you
Better
say is the
buses.
main better buses? It's
Yeah,
There
better
you
awesome.
button.
go, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, the buses are better. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe there's subliminal changes. Just that we've all done it so long. We know what works and what doesn't work, and we have a smooth kind of groove to the way we respond through the day, and it becomes kind of a more comfortable kind of second nature thing because you've done it so much for your whole life, and you know what works and what doesn't, and yeah.
And would you say
I'll
the
tell you what,
audiences,
I
excuse
was
me,
going to say one of the funniest things I remember, and my memory's been so refreshed in the last year because Zizi and I have been documenting everything, going over every photograph, all the video footage. And there were so many funny photographs from that tour where at 1:30, 1:45 in the morning, which is usually bus call, leaving the hotel, um, I'd be carrying a sleeping ZZ to the bus. That was part of my job every night. And just it was just so funny to be out on tour with him, and he's a grown man now. But we're still doing the same thing, checking out at 1:45 a.m. to get on the bus. So I got to say that's the biggest change. It's been a huge change. There's something really intense about when you as an artist, when you can just move forward and forget about the past, it's probably best for, your music and art. But every once in a while, there's something that makes you go back. And this project that created this reunion has been that. It's been super cathartic uh, for me to have to go back and look at every single, I mean, just like thousands of photographs and hundreds of video clips, and talk about it and make notes about it and catalog it. And yeah, that's part of to answer your question about the biggest change. That was the biggest change, was just feeling that the weight of the history on this last G3 run. Whereas before I was just thinking, be new, be different, push your envelope. But there was a lot of that thinking back and realizing all the history. And we reminded each other of it, I think, Zizi and I, every day. It was one of those things where you just shake your head and you go, wow. That's a lot of years have passed.
I think when I look at it uh, from my perspective, back then, psychologically, you're virtually a different creature 30
Mhm.
years ago, and you don't have all the history. Uh, so I think back then it was very exciting, but a part of me, a part of my mind was focused on, okay, how am I going to fit in? How am I going to deliver appropriately? What's my contribution? Am I going to be able to keep up with these guys and entertain on a level that is appropriate for the package and all? So there was some of that. I think that's probably not uncommon in the minds of most entertainers. How am I going to deliver here? You know, most of the time the answer is you're going to just go out there and kick ass. You're just going to do your best. You're surrounded by greatness, and go out there and don't forget what a privilege this is. I mean, oddly enough, to even have to say that, I know for me, you forget while you're doing it. At least I can, because of all the moving parts and giving your attention to things that you want to prepare for so you can contribute appropriately. And I have to remind myself, and I do this consciously whenever I stand on the stage and I look out at the audience, and I tell myself, don't you forget this moment and the privilege of it. So as the years went on, the difference between in that realm between the earlier G3 and the later one that we just did was 30 years of confidence building and experience, and knowing that it was more like a feeling of returning home as opposed to a new room, a new house.
Steve, 1969, I just thought about it last time. 1969 was also interesting for you because in 94 you did Sex and Religion, which was a band record, completely different. Then you went to Fire Garden, which was very different. Was it also interesting time for yourself to figure out where this is going? Because it was so different poles in your discography, so to say.
Well, in 96, it was at that point, like Joe said, it's better to look forward and just keep all your power is in your now moving forward. And that's especially true when you're younger. At that point, that was the main objective. It happened unconsciously. You're just looking forward. You're moving forward. So in 96, when we were doing that, it wasn't a stretch for me to consider going from this project, let's say it's like, Roth or Whitesnake, to Passion and Warfare, which was wildly different, to G3, which was more in that ballpark, back to this, and then over to this, and then over to that. You come across something and you just internalize what it feels like, and your instincts will tell you yes or no. Yeah. Sorry, I
All
rambled.
no, it's very interesting. I mean, all three of you are at amazing points in your career. You've all have so many great albums out recently. Eric, you're doing the Experience Hendrix tour. Steve, you're doing this incredible tour with Beat. Joe, you're doing the Sammy Hagar stuff. You're so busy, and I suppose you don't have often time to look back, right? I mean, as you're so busy and relevant in the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We're
always
always
the moment.
preparing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's always now.
yeah.
I still think I love reading Joe. You sometimes talk a little bit about G3 secrets, for instance, and I had to laugh last time I read where you said you had to convince Yngwie Malmsteen not to throw his Stratocaster in the air while Steve is soloing because Steve has his eyes closed. I really think you should write an autobiography about backstage at the G3.
Yeah, it's everybody has their own way of performing, and you want to respect it, and you want to give them their space. Um, but yeah, I mean, if people aren't used to sharing the stage, that can be an issue that comes up, and I hate telling people what to do. But at some point, if there were some just moments where, yeah, Yngwie's guitar and Steve's head were getting a little too close. And Steve would be totally unaware of it. Because he'd just be sitting there playing.
Okay.
Remember that.
Um, yeah, so yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think from the audience perspective, all of it's great. They would have loved to see a tragedy, a
Yeah, right.
Stratocaster coming right down on
I
Steve.
got kicked on the top of my head from his foot because that's how far he kicks.
Well, as a
Uh,
fan, I'd rather have Steve stay safe. I think we all prefer him to be whole.
yeah, yeah. It's a funny thing, but it's all easy stuff to take care of, and all of the players were always great at eventually realizing, they had to, maybe make a slight shift in their performance styles or, their gear, to make the thing work. Like Steve, having a separate rig just to quickly roll out. I mean, that's really professional, just making the show work. And everybody eventually would understand that very quickly, and we get these issues sorted out pretty soon. So yeah, but that's always the case. You have to work together.
But do
Yeah,
you have
there's
a
a
little bit
list
of
of sorry, there's a list of things you're confronted with that, such as you're on the stage with other players now, and there's volume considerations, and your volume can come at you in all sorts of directions: the front, the back, the sides, your inner ears, which luckily later on became it solved a lot of problems. But you're also, where do you stand? When do you go to this guy? When do you go to that guy to create the camaraderie? Create the camaraderie to showcase it. And how much do you play? And when do you shut up? You know, and when do you allow space? And when do you send a musical signal? And when are you receiving one? All these kinds of things come along with playing in an ensemble. So that was very good for me. I learned a lot. I learned through those things. That's one of the differences from the early days till now. And those lessons have served me well through my whole career.
amazing. So you played 13 shows last year. And of course, now I have to ask the question because what about shows in Europe or is it planned to bring G3 back on the road to other places too?
Oh, I hope so. I hope that we can all figure out how to get together and do more shows. We all have things planned. It's the competition for venues internationally is really stiff. I mean, it's so hard to get every venue nailed down because every night there's 100 bands looking for the same venue. So that means our team, our managers and agents are booking a year to a year and a half in advance, and so it is difficult more than it was, back when G3 started. It's just really hard. But we keep working on it. It's a thing that's always, at least in my camp, we're always planning on keeping a certain area of the future open for that. And we slowly send out feelers to different promoters in different territories to see if they'd be interested. Um, you do know you have to be invited uh, to play. You just can't show up with a G3 and say, "Hey, let us play." So that's the business side of it is very carefully requesting an invitation.
And what other projects or what's next for you guys as in your own careers then?
Well, Steve and I are working on an album, and we've got a tour set up Europe starting in June. Um, Before we do that, Steve's out with Beat. I'm out with Sammy Hagar. And Eric, what are you up to?
Oh, just working on a new record. I've been writing songs and recording, so um,
Nice.
that's mainly what I've been doing. Yeah, just trying to come up with a new record.
Yes, we want one. We want a
Yes.
new Eric Johnson
Oh,
record right away.
well, it's country. I hope that's okay. It's
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go country and
Wow.
wanted to be a country singer. So that's my real thing. I
It's
don't
going to
know.
move to Nashville.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta. No, it's actually kind of a return to my roots, kind of where I'm trying to make it a kind of a more of a straight ahead blues rock record. So it's fun because it's the music I grew up on. So I'm kind of just
Nice.
trying to play, stuff that we all, when we first started playing and stuff. So it's been fun.
Nice.
Amazing. And the Satch Vai record, what about it? Can you talk a bit about it?
I have these cards like all in a desk over
Screenshot?
here of all the songs that we're working on. As far as I can tell, Steve, we've got three totally finished, and we've
Yeah.
got a mountain of amazing ideas that are, 70% finished. Um, with the fires going on in LA, we're once again really working remotely a lot, but it's going to get done. I hope to be down there in a couple of weeks if everything continues to calm down. That's going to be one crazy album, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's a whole different kind of a mindset for me and I think Joe in
Yeah.
that we've collaborated through the years on many different types of things. With the G3 tours, we've contributed solos to various uh, other artists, but when we've always been very independent with our solo work. So for many decades, the vast majority of what we do is focused on my inner, your own personal inner voice, along with work with producers and whoever. But it's a very different headspace when you're actually co-creating with somebody and sharing ideas. And it's kind of like if you got a couple of painters together and Picasso did the outline and then Rembrandt said, well, now I think I would like to add this. And then Picasso goes back and says, oh, okay, that's cool. Let me, do this. So you get something that has various colors in it, and it's fun. It's great because Joe's easy, really easy, and I've never been involved in a situation. I've worked with people with vocals, and I've produced singers and this kind of thing, but the melodies are like to the artist, they're precious, you know, and to be able to share that and work with somebody on that, and it's a process. You have to learn to let go of a certain, I know for me, a certain preciousness and allow for collaboration and growth. And it's really, it's just great. It's sort of like what we were talking about even back in 96, where we're just focusing on moving forward in the now. And, you're always doing that. And so, like right now, doing this with Joe, it really feels fresh and new and different in the now. And maybe, I don't know, if we're around 15, 20 years and we're doing an interview about our second record or whatever, we'll have some perspective. But right now, we're just in the now of it all. It's great.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful for each three of you for taking the time. It's been really fantastic talking to you. Thank you. You've all had a huge impact on my life and still have. And thanks for the talk with you.
Really nice.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Very
Enjoyed it.
welcome.
Thank you.
So
Take
great to
care.
see you guys, Steve and Eric. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
See you soon,
You
all
too,
right?
Joe. See you, Steve.
All
Take
right,
care.
gentlemen.
See y'all
All
soon.
the
See ya.
best.
All right.